Hello listeners, and welcome to part 2 of this mini-series on the Lyman family. For more information on Guinevere's work, you can follow the links in the episode description. But for now, here is Guinevere Turner.
There's these kind of beautiful moments where you would collect scales from the fish, and it's like keeping those parts of those experiences with you, which I thought was such again another kind of really young thing to do, and such a beautiful thing to do as well. And it goes back to those kind of jarring moments where you would have these experiences down at the
that's all the scales and all the things.
They're a lot bigger than I thought they'd be. I was trying to picture them in my mind, and they are kind of like the size of my thumbnail.
Yeah. Anyway, for those of you who are listening, I'm showing Casey this diary that I have with 1 billion fish scales in it.
It's gorgeous.
The name, who caught them, how what pounds they were, blah blah blah. Like it's I'm an archivist, if nothing else.
It's another one of those moments that you capture so well through your kind of child's eye of having these beautiful experiences down at the creek and running around with all of these children, and then all of a sudden there's these chickens and these fish that are being used for feeding people on the farm, and then you have another beautiful childhood experience, and then all of a sudden someone's getting hit with a paddle. So it's very much allowing us some insight into what it was like as a child on both sides and how they coexisted as well at the same time, which must be very kind of almost give you whiplash as a child, I imagine, kind of being like, oh, 1 minute I'm in this frame of mind and now this is happening. And it's all decorated in a way that keeps you in the book, keeps you reading, and makes you kind of really feel like you could almost be there. So seeing that page in that book is actually quite wild for me after reading your memoir and then seeing those pictures. How did your life in the community change after Dario took you under her wing? I don't know which way you would want to word it. Everything started to change for you at that point, really.
It was like in my tiny universe, this is like, getting the ultimate promotion. I was also, for the first time, and this was very rare in the family I grew up in, I was elevated above my mother. I was like cooler, sexier, like more interesting, more important, etc. And because I was raised like Jessie, who was the woman who pretty much ran it, she said to me, like, I don't know if I put this in the book, actually. She's like, you are your mother's mother. Like, whatever is happening right now with the two of you, like, you were put on this earth to teach her something.
Wow.
I'm gonna go with that's actually true. Which is like a really fucked up thing to realize, that like some weird ass culture that was fed to you when you were a kid is actually true. My mother is she's a complicated figure, and she's not she doesn't have agency in the same way that I do. And we're only just reading the book. She's only just reading the book right now, and we're only just talking about it, and that's super intense. For those of you who don't know, like, my mother left the cult with an abusive man who's abusive to her and abusive to me and my sister, and like half of the book is about that. And reconciling that for her is something that's in process, because she hasn't read the book. I mean, she's reading the book and texting me about it every day, and I'm like, I actually, like, the other day, it was like 9 a.m, and I was like riddled with anxiety, and I was like, why am I so anxious? Why am I so anxious? I was like, I need to get a bottle of rosé. And I'm like, no, we don't actually need to be drinking at 9 a.m. because we're anxious. Like, that's just like textbook no. But I was like, but why am I so anxious? I didn't get the bottle of rosé, by the way. And I'm like, oh, it's because my mom is writing to me in real time about her response to the book. But she's like, in the beginning of the book, so she's like, oh my God, Phaedra. And here's what Phaedra said to me, the spirit of the Ouija board spirit that we talked to in the book. And she's like, oh, Obre, blah, blah, blah. And I finally, I was like, and I texted her, I was like, Mom, you're going to get to a really fucking hard part to read for you because it's in which you are a terrible, terrible mother and do not protect me. And it's all very upsetting. And she's like, yeah, I know. And so then I wrote her, like when I had this rose inclined anxiety attack, I was like, I just need to tell her, like, please write everything down separately.
Yep.
And tell me at the end what you think, because I like the stress of how you're going to respond to this. Like I don't know what it's like to have been a terrible person, but she's about to, and I need her to just like, just like do that on your own time. Don't make me go through this motherfucking story again, because also I think that one of the like complicated and challenging things about writing a story like this is that like I think people read it and assume that you're totally comfortable talking about like the worst things that happened to you, and I'm like, no, nope. Also, I'm not better. Like, this was not a cathartic experience. This was a re-traumatizing experience. But I did it because, and actually, after not talking to my mom for 3 years, I finally called her because I was like, I'm done being mad, and I'm done having people ask me, "Are you dead?"
Yeah, and now when people say, "How was your childhood?" read my book.
Yeah. I just, I was just talking to her, and I realized that I don't like it, like, just because I wrote this doesn't mean I'm better or like even in any way over it. Like I'm not like a super healthy, I mean, I'm good, but I'm not like a, like whatever, that was that and that was this and this is that. I'm in process, and
Yeah.
writing about it has opened up so many, like, just, talking to other people and stuff, but I'm not like, yeah, let's like totally go to chapter 34 where I'm like forced to give a fucking blowjob for like 2 years of my life. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not okay. I just said that. Like that, it's like it's a challenge to share your experience of trauma and then engage with how people respond to it.
Yeah. I imagine as well that I think it's important to highlight that in a process of recovery, there isn't really an end point. So I think a big misconception that comes through from people like myself coming from a non-cultic experience and wanting or trying to understand somebody that's had a cultic experience, being like, oh, but you're better now. Oh, you've written a book, so you must be okay now. But the process of healing never actually ends. It's continuous. Things crop up. You might not have thought about an experience for years and years, and all of a sudden something, a smell, a sound, a song, a person reminds you of something that happened, and that can kind of have an effect on you for another few weeks, months, or years, where there's another hurdle to look at, to deconstruct, to think about, why does it affect me this way? What can I do to move past it? And then it will happen again and again. So that's another really important thing to point out for listeners such as myself, coming from an outside perspective, that it is a continuous journey. And when there are conversations with individuals who are willing to share parts of their experiences and be open and vulnerable and honest, to allow some of us to have that education, that it's a very sensitive and precious thing, and to just be very mindful in those conversations, because we don't know how a person will feel when they're telling a story, or if they kind of desensitize whilst they're saying it and then afterwards go away feeling very kind of sad, down, exhausted. I always like to check in with people after I have interviews and just say, was that, are you feeling okay? Was that okay? And to always check in with me if you're not, in a few days' time, so that we can think about where we go from there in terms of taking care of people's well-being, because that's so important when people have these conversations.
But
Just to
Casey,
go off on a tangent.
I'm a tough guy. I really am. And, you know, there's a reason that I didn't write this book until I was 50 something, because I just, you know, wasn't ready in all these ways. And anyway, I very much appreciate what you're saying, because it must, like, you must interview tons of people who are just like talking about it for the first time or the second time or the third time. I feel like one of the most interesting things that has evolved since I wrote this book, which, by the way, I don't know, I just really didn't like the title, even though I made it up. I had like a billion other titles, and my editors were like, editor was like, no, no, no. And I'm like, can I call it Guinevere? For listeners, I, as a kid, because I was an incredible weirdo, not because I'm actually a homosexual, which is also true, but like I like was called Guinevere when I first came out of the cult and went into public life, and it's hilarious to me now because like, did they see that I was gay before I did? But anyway, so When the World Didn't End to me was like one on a big list, so they were like, that's the one. And I was like, oh, I don't know. It seems a little pandering. I'm very interested in like how cults are represented in you know, public, you know, cultural, in the cultural moment, right? And it's not good. It's not really good, actually. And I have never, aside from my own movie, Charlie Says, I've never seen anything on TV or in a film that speaks to my experience. Like, never. I mean, so there's a movie called Martha Marcy May Marlene Martha Marlene, blah, blah, which is actually really good. I really, really like that, but it's like a woman out of a cult, you know, like I've never seen my experience represented.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot focused on in documentaries with cult survivors where people talk about maybe the beginning and the middle, but there's not much on the end, as in once a person leaves and the struggles of recovery and the processes that people go through. And I think that's a big thing that's missing from the educational space in the cultiverse. You know, the kind of different pathways that people might go down in terms of understanding their experiences, putting words to tactics that they were subjected to. The Sarah Lawrence documentary Stolen Youth did a very good job at capturing that, more so than a lot of things I've seen on TV, but there's still a big gap missing in that part, I would say.
So first of all, I went to Sarah Lawrence.
I have that on my notes. I just thought that was so strange, like a few years before, but it's still, I think it's
I mean,
yeah.
I'm kind of dying for them to ask me to do an event because like basically Sarah Lawrence College is the hero of my movie. I mean, of my book. You know what I mean? Like it's just like I'm like I have to go. Like Sarah Lawrence. I can't not go there. Like, you know, and experience that, whatever that is. But there's that thing about that documentary that is, you know, part of a larger question. So I mean, I am a cult survivor, but also just a cult scholar. And I've been like paying attention to cults. I was watching the David Koresh thing happen in real time. And I was like, stop, stop. Like, oh my God, do you understand what an apocalyptic cult, like, do you understand that you're doing the thing that is gonna make everybody die? Like, stop. I was like in tears every day. I was like, oh no, they just need like one little schmo like me to be like, okay, here's how this shit works. And don't do this unless you want everyone to die, which maybe they did. Sorry, I get really emotional when I talk about that because it was the first time I was like, okay, yeah, I grew up in a cult and I understand how they work, and you're doing it wrong and people are going to die and I don't have any power to do anything about it. That was hard. Sorry, you actually asked me a question.
I didn't know if you were going to say something about the Stolen Youth documentary.
Right, yeah. So the thing about that was that, you know, like in this like proliferation of cult documentaries, I'm sure you see, I see, like, you know, like it's not about the people. It's not about us. It's about you know, like, you know, people sitting on their couches being like, ooh, cult documentary. You know what I mean? Like, ooh, it's true crime. And like, you know, our society's obsession with true crime is its own subject, but like the fact that cult stories are under that umbrella is also of note. Because I actually was watching something that you did with this, I forget the guy's name, but like he was making the argument slash posing the idea that like not all cults are criminal. And this is very interesting to me. So like, you know, the cult I grew up with was fucking criminal. Like they, you know, were having sex with, you know, 12-year-old girls, etc. They also, like, you know, tried to rob a bank and some of them went to jail, blah, blah, blah. But like a cult is not a crime. A cult is, and I think this is the most important thing, when you're calling a group of people something that they would never call themselves, you should be careful. Because like, of course, the people I grew up with would never call themselves a cult. And like, and what we've seen, it, you know, in like the current kind of, you know, cult climate is that like, you know, people like Keith Raniere just get ahead of themselves and say like, you know what, people are going to call us a cult, we're not a cult. But the major fact is that like cults don't call themselves cults, and so like maybe we shouldn't call them cults. We should call them whatever the fuck we want to call them, especially if they traumatized us. But do you know what I mean? Like, it's super intense. So when I was watching the SLC documentary, my alma mater, like I like hilariously texted with a lot of friends because like the Slonim Woods 9 was like already a punchline, because we were like, what do those people even do? Like it was always just like so far. It was like the most remote location at Sarah Lawrence. And then the documentarian, he made a big, you know, play to say that like he's not going to, like he made this documentary like devaluing, decentering Larry Ray, and you know, really talking to the victim survivors. But I'm sorry. You showed me videos of this man slapping himself so his sister would stop crying. You showed me videos of like Larry Ray like pulling this kid's tongue out. Like you like I don't know that like your whole like idea of like, you know, centering the survivors is fully realized, because they also get like, we need to look at that stuff, we need to understand like this is fucking madness, this is abuse, this is like violence, this is insanity. And so like in that way it was incredibly compelling to watch this documentary, but like over and over he showed that footage and I was like, I don't know if it's just culty, baby culty me just being like, I don't think this is okay, or if it's just like me who hates horror movies, even though I'm like famous for writing one, is is okay. I was just like, I don't, this doesn't feel okay. This doesn't feel okay. And it feels like you're repeating it for like the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Well, somebody, Elgin Strait, who is a former second generation member of the Unification Church, who has his own podcast called Falling Out, he once told me that it's trauma porn. He used the term trauma porn for when spectators want to hear the worst parts of people's stories. And that stayed with me after that. I was thinking, oh my goodness, absolutely, that is the term that we should move away from. We should be trying to do the opposite of that, which
and yeah, did I write a book? That's trauma porn. Do you know what I mean? Because I actually there's a website called Goodreads, and it's like every schmo who ever read your book. I say schmo, thank you to all the beautiful reviews, people. And so like you can go deep. I as a filmmaker, I don't really pay attention to reviews. I don't care. But like there's something very like granular and true about like these reviewers on Goodreads. And so I just, I'm not a masochist. I'm a arguably big top, but I read all of the 1-star reviews, and what they all said, like the thread, if I can just go like sort of macro with it, is that they wanted more cult stuff, and they found the stuff that happens after the cult, which is, for listeners, I just go through some like horrific sexual abuse and violence and eventually get away, and here I am. They found it, like this one woman wrote, I just felt like a creep when I was reading it. I'm like, okay, that's on you. If you feel like a creep when you're reading about sexual abuse, and like, I'm so sorry, like that is not like actually what we did in my film Betty Page, which is like, you get it. This is a menace. This is fucked up. It's behind closed doors. I'm like, no, I was like, you know what? We need to actually talk about that. We need to like fucking like make people live through it to understand like this is not just like this systemic fucking thing that almost every woman I know well enough to talk has experienced on some level. Like I need to write this. And like the fact that people are like, that was too much. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Was my childhood too much for you?
our book club, I say our book club, it sounds quite culty. In the book club that I attend each month, we choose a different book by kind of what's everybody got on their agenda, and I mentioned that I had this interview with you coming up, and that's what I was reading at the time. We were all thinking about books to kind of talk about, so we chose When the World Didn't End for last month's book club. And what I heard during our conversation from 3 other cult survivors who had also read the book was that the second half of the book was incredibly important to each of those for different reasons. And Erica Borman, a fellow memoirist who's written the most incredible book, Mission of Malice, My Exodus from Quasi-Ubuntu, she talked about how when she left Quasi-Ubuntu and fell into a series of damaging relationships and abusive situations, that so much of your story resonated with her. And again, it goes back to so much of the discussions that aren't taking place about the aftermath of exiting a cult or leaving a cult or being forced to leave a cult, because some people don't leave by choice and then rebuild or build a life afterwards. So those 1-star reviews don't mean anything when you have cult survivors coming to you saying like, this impacted me in such a profound way. So we can happily ignore all of those.
I mean, I make a lot. Apparently, I make a lot of jokes because I realize I just like introduced several concepts with that, because laugh to keep from crying. That I can't technically be called a cult survivor because I begged to stay. So I mean, obviously I am, but like there's something funny about that to me, that like, imagining a life in which I was allowed to stay, and like how long and how weird and how fucking difficult it would have been to get out when I was a teenager. Like so many of my friends, the women that I grew up with, whose stories are fucking intense. So much violence, so much violence, so much more violence. I think what happened to this family is that they had to actually tell everyone that like Mel Lyman is dead, which might have been a shock, because like it was years. I mean, it was 4 years of my life knowing that this man was dead. And then just becoming teenagers and being like, we can't all marry each other. Like we're siblings. We are grown up together. Like we are like, we love each other in a way that is not romantic or sexual, you know?
One of the moments that had me really uncomfortable and really gripped, and it probably sounds so strange for me to pick out this one moment in when the whole book in its entirety exists, but I don't know if it's because of a personal experience I had when I was younger. But there's this moment you have on the farm where you find this baby mouse, and it's so stressful because you want more than anything to be able to help this poor tiny little thing and
Right. So
help it survive somehow. Which happened to me when I was younger. I found this baby mouse, its eyes were closed, it had like fleas all over it, and it was the teeniest, tiniest little thing. And I had a pipette and I was trying to like give it milk and stuff, and it didn't work. But this part in the book is like something out of a horror film, because you have this tiny little thing that you're trying to transport somewhere to safety or find something to help it. And you go through a door and there's adults there, and they're like, what do you have? And then you get past them, and then there's another group of adults, and it's kind of like when somebody's showering and that there's something ominous around, and you're like, oh no, the shower curtain's going to come back, and then it doesn't. And then they're like brushing their teeth in the bathroom mirror, and then they close the mirror with one finger, and you're like, there's going to be someone standing behind them, and there isn't. And it gives me goosebumps thinking about it, because you had this moment where you were getting past one thing and the horror didn't happen, and then there was another moment where you're like, is it going to happen now? And it didn't. And then eventually the adults get involved and everything goes wrong. And this is where your kind of brilliance merges in your writing of horror films and your writing of your memoir. It was just like such a small thing, but it felt huge when I was reading the book. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I just wanted to let you know that that's how I experienced that part of your book.
Ratso Maru, a humble soul, wearing smatches and touches of rigmarole, with a tail and a tail and a tale to tell, in disguised ears and eyes, and a something and a bell, hippo hawk, polylock, nimbery bimbery poo, was a piece from Mel Lyman's book Mirror at the End of the Road that I loved, because I don't know, it was actually like knowable, I guess, unlike so much of his memoir. Was like, I just had no idea what he was talking about as a kid, but this one I was like, he isn't actually talking about an animal in this moment. But I was so like, I just loved it. I love lyrical things, and so I named this mouse that. And I actually cried a lot writing that particular part of the story, because it's also the story of how like Daria and I became friends, and how I got chosen to be elsewhere, elevated. I was, I guess I look at it now, Casey, and I'm like, I was just trying to save things that, because I couldn't be saved, I can't lie, like, when I think about Ratso, I'm still sad. I'm still sad because like he was such a bonding. I don't even know if Ratso was a girl or a boy, but like he was such a bonding moment for me and Daria, and like his death the next day, spoiler alert, listeners, um, was so devastating. I don't know. I mean, it's it's a I was searching, I think, for like something grounding, and like this little mouse was very grounding to me, and her love for this mouse was very grounding to me, and I was like, okay, this is why I think Daria, she might hate me to this day. She just wrote me something very weird in a text, but it's just one of those moments of life where I was like, um my love for another thing can actually bring me more connection, which is like weird because like what, I'm growing up in a cult, and challenged in so many ways, but in ways that I did not understand because I was a kid. But like when I think about Ratso, it still makes me cry.
It's I mean, it's a beautiful part of the book, but very stressful and very sad as well. And there were so many moments that I could have picked out, but that one for me was one that I definitely wanted to ask you about. And the specific kind of teachings and doctrines of the Lyman family reminded me a lot of the Fellowship of Friends, with the New Age aspects, reincarnation, doomsday, talking about space and star signs. And it's kind of picking out a lot of different things from New Age influences, and kind of mashing a lot of stuff together, with the
Right, which is
specifics.
because like people ask me all the time, like, what did he believe in, the leader, and I'm like, A, he was dead, and B, like you have to, and this is why I wrote the book the way I did, which is entirely from the perspective of a child, is like, we didn't know. I mean, you're just fucking born into this shit, and like I'm like, I don't know anything else. I feel like this is a hard thing for people to wrap their heads around. Like, imagine that you're just born into a community that is like insular and what's that word I'm looking for? I'm a writer. I swear to God, I can find this word. Help me, Casey.
Cloistered.
Sealed, I guess, sealed, but like there's a better
Yeah.
word. And so it's just something that I like thought about a lot when I was writing the book, which was like, I need people to understand that like when you are born into something and raised in it, it's just everything. Like, we're not trained as children to like suddenly be like, but what about the outside world? No, no. I mean, that's just until you do, like that's not a thing that ever happens. Like you could, Jesus Christ, they could have taught me French.
It comes through incredibly in your writing that's exactly the experiences that you had, and the environment that you grew up in, and the thoughts you had. And in the book club meeting, I talked about the most profound part of the book for me, where I was reading it and I was like, oh my goodness, this is such a huge revelation, was the idea of cognitive dissonance through the language that you knew and understood. So you've mentioned already that you're a Gemini, and a Gemini is like, the sign of the twins. And at one point in your mind, as a kind of on the cusp of being a teenager, there's this moment where you're having thoughts and feelings of one thing and thoughts and feelings of another that just don't work together. and you're wondering if it's your fault or if it's the group's fault, and you're like, maybe it's my Gemini sign, maybe my two sides are fighting against one another, and that is cognitive dissonance. But who knows that term when they're in a cult? Who knew that term kind of pre 5 years ago? So it was the most incredible thing to read. Your kind of young mind was understanding that there was these conflicting thoughts, and the terminology that you had to apply to it was the cult terminology of using it's my Gemini sign. And it was just so incredible to read. And I actually had to stop reading at one point because I was like, wow, what's happening in this child's mind?
I wrote, and it's actually from my diaries at the time. I wrote, I have two Gemini sides and they con each other. And I am just a big con. I'm 10 years old. I mean, what the fuck, man? I mean,
Incredible, though, it shows your kind of your underlying critical thinking and doubts coming through without really understanding that there is anything outside of that environment. I don't know, it's just, to me, it was just incredible to read that, especially coming straight from you as a child.
and like this is a piece of madness with writing this book. So obviously I have these diaries. You can see scotched out 1979, but like scotched out 04, because when the world didn't end, it was turned to zero. I was like, at first with my editor, I was like, I have all these diaries. What do I do with them? Like, are they a part of the story or not? Or do I just use them? And she was like, I don't know. And then like once it started really digging in, I was like, holy shit, like, no, they're essential. They are essential for so many reasons. And number one is that like I knew going in that the people I grew up with were gonna call me to question about my veracity, my like, how the fuck could you even know this and remember this shit? And I'm like, y'all bitches gave me a journal when I was a kid. I'm sorry. You gave it, to all of us, but like, I really took to that. And I really fucking wrote shit down. And like, it's very, I was like, thanks for co-writing the book, baby. That was really amazing. Because I'm just like, okay, you can't, like, when you write a story like this, especially because I wrote it from such a young perspective, obviously people are gonna, call you out, blah blah blah. And I'm like, this is literally what I wrote when I was a kid. So you can't really be super mad at me or even fucking deny what I'm saying, because like that's me as a kid. I wrote because of this, I'm reaching for my book right now, which I'm not like a creep who always has my book right available, but my girlfriend is mad at me because I hadn't signed one for her. But I wrote, my author note is the following, and this is all about those diaries. When something we love is taken from us, we love it more. So it was for me when I was cut off from one world and forced into another that felt strange and dangerous. My way of coping with this loss was to preserve with a passion every detail of where I came from, to recite over and over to myself a list of the people I missed, to tell myself the stories of the world I left behind with a ferocious will to savor and protect my memories. I did this through writing and through reading and rereading the diaries I'd already written, desperate to keep it all alive, sure that I would go back to it someday, and hell-bent on being worthy of that return.
Wow. Oh, it's like being an intimate book reading. Thank you for that.
But do you know what I mean? Like, I needed to say that. Like, don't come for me. Like, you gave me a fucking diary and it turns out I'm a writer.
Yeah. And the really unique part of this book was the volume of diary entries included that you were, where you weren't recalling memories, or reframing them or anything like that. You were taking what you'd written at that time from, as you said, an archived resource that you had. What was it like for you as a writer, as a kind of a cult survivor, as somebody putting this book together, to go back through all of those writings that you made as a child to to kind of work out what you were going to use? Because some of it's really heartbreaking stuff.
I mean, as my author note suggests and points to, that this one object, which is like me being in the family and then out, is something that I read and reread and obsessed over. Like I could probably literally tell you the entire fucking book, and it's as you might imagine 365 pages long. So revisiting it, even though like it was like it is such a like a tome, it has so much power for me. It was already very familiar is actually my point. But it was also like hilarious to me because like in my mind, I'm like, I grew up in a cult with like no doctors. Literally go to the dentist at some point in this book. I'm like, okay, whatever. You remember things how you remember them. So it was like, as I've said, I was like, fuck. I was like, fuck, that was a really fucking rough childhood, girl. But I was also like, I'm so fucking tough. I'm so fucking tough. And like, maybe that's not like the most beautiful thing about me, but it is 100% who I am. I am tough as fuck. And when people are like, I was listening to a podcast, I listen to them a lot now, of this woman who was like, wow, I had a really difficult childhood. My parents were divorced when I was 6. I'm like, you what now? Oh, I'm sorry. Were your parents divorced when you were 6? I try not to be mean, but I'm also like, okay, girl, did you recover? It's not the trauma Olympics. It's not the trauma Olympics, but honestly, sometimes I'm like,
read my book. The second half of the book is very different from the first half, but it's almost like two cults, because I would describe the second one as almost being like a family cult environment that you moved into, in terms of the controlling measures that you were under, and the information control, the abuses that you sustained in this second environment. And it's when you leave Daria and you leave the convoy and you leave the group to go and live with your mum and her partner and your sibling. And the circumstances in your mum leaving the group, were they similar to yours? Was it her decision to leave the group, or was it a decision made for her?
I mean, it's a funny and interesting question because I'm moving to the smoking space, because I literally just asked her like 3 days ago, like, Mom, I don't know, like, what the fuck happened to you, like, and she's a figure. Anyway, her answer was, predictably unsatisfying. But I was kicked out Like I didn't, I didn't just want to be there. Like imagine like it's your whole life and they're like, go away. I was like devastated. I was like confused. I begged. I said, please, please, please. And I, now I laugh because I'm like, I'm not a survivor, actually, etc. Um, I don't know. It's a big question. I mean, because it's very like arguably the best thing that ever happened to me is the worst thing that ever happened to me, which is that I was kicked out of a cult and I was like, I don't know how to like even express the devastation and fear that I was feeling at 11 years old of like, now this is like, the world full of like soulless people and like they are contagious is one way I was raised. Like, like you can like look someone in the eye and if they don't have a soul, like that's actually something that could happen to you. And I was like just really fucking scared. I was really fucking scared.
That is the end of part 2 of this mini-series on the Lyman family. To find out more information about Guinevere, you can follow the links in the episode description. And to get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.